So Epic has revealed their new clothing simulation pipeline from Marvelous Designer. And in Unreal 5.4, you're going to be able to transfer garments directly from Marvelous Designer to Unreal using the USD format, and they're going to simulate in real time proper clothing simulation. You need to set a few settings, but basically it's automatic. They're also going to keep the fabric simulation setup that you chose in Marvelous, which is amazing. So if you chose jean fabric or cotton or whatever, it's going to keep that. So let's go through how the process is going to work. And it's going to launch on April 20th, 2024. You can download preview 1 of UE5.4 from the Epic launcher right now, but that doesn't include this functionality, just so you know. All right, so here are the 6 steps. Step 1, you make the garment. So you use Marvelous Designer to create your costume, and you're making sure you set your correct fabric settings because those simulation properties are going to transfer over. Step 2, USD export. So once you're finished in Marvelous Designer, you're going to export that garment via USD. And that's how in step 3, you import that into Unreal Engine. Then in step 4, you start working on the cloth panel graph. And the cloth panel graph is where you set up your various nodes and decide how it's all going to simulate. Step 5 is optional. If you're using UEFN, then you can migrate to that. And then step 6, you add your garment to a character using the Chaos Cloth component. All right, so now let's go through some of the improvements in the workflow with 5.4 that they mentioned in the keynote. Well, there's this new feature called auto-generated graph, and that's made when you first create the cloth asset node. So before you had to set everything up from scratch, and now it's going to automatically set up some parts when you import that USD from Marvelous Designer. And it's going to transfer the values from Marvelous Designer and create a physics node and various parameters that will work straight out of the box. Now, the USD import process is going to create 2 meshes. It's going to bring in a simulation mesh and a render mesh. The simulation mesh is a lower res mesh that's used for the simulation maths, and then the render mesh is a high res mesh that you actually see. So essentially the render mesh is driven by the sim mesh. Now, as part of these UE 5.4 improvements, there's now an auto skinning node and an auto load node, and I'm not sure exactly how that works right now, but it seems like they help to speed up the process. And another thing that's new in 5.4 is this thing called the kinematic collider. And that's a way for clothing simulation to be more accurate because it works basically off the skin of the character. Before you had to use capsules, which it got very difficult. And the kinematic collider supposedly helps that and also helps with the math of working out self-collision. So the mesh, when it folds over and interacts with itself, acts correctly. And also new in 5.4 is this transfer skin weights node as part of the cloth panel graph. And this node is going to figure out skin weights based on an algorithm called in-paint weight. So it doesn't use closest point on surface, which a lot of DCCs use. You can actually set it to use that. But what they want you to use is this new algorithm called in-paint weight. And another new node in 5.4 is the remesh node. And it lets you auto-generate lower resolution meshes based on a target percentage. So you can use the remesh node either on the render mesh or the simulation mesh that you brought in. You can do it to either or none. And the other big news is that these new simulation improvements now include accurate self-collision in the simulation. Now, as far as performance goes, they were talking about 30 frames per second for a really high-end, high-quality simulation in a close-up scenario for this clothing. And if you're using lower LODs for your clothing, then frame rates can come in anywhere from 50 to 60 frames per second. But of course, it's all going to depend on a number of different factors: total simulated vertices, self-collisions, solver iterations, etc. All right, so that's what's coming in UE 5.4. Just to reiterate, it's all going to be available as part of the 5.4 proper launch, which is on April 20th, 2024. And there's going to be official documentation about all of these new features. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think of all these new features and if you're excited about using them when they launch.